The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Okay, hello everybody. My name is Chris Congleton, and I'll kind of be introducing this webinar today. We're actually thank you for attending this webinar, Introduction to Working Days. Roy Sturgill has been gracious enough to present this webinar today, and we thank him for that. Just a couple things to mention. Here's our upcoming schedule. On the 31st, we're actually going to have an overview of ProjectWise by Henry Wells, Pam Colts, and Alex Smith. That's actually for KYTC employees only, because of just ProjectWise is a KYTC software only thing. And then on August 5th, we'll actually have an introduction to Clearview by Jamie Anderson, and again, that's for KYTC employees only. On the 17th, we'll actually be having a webinar on preparing a design executive summary, which should be very important to most people. I know I'm going to be watching that with intent. Keith Cottle and Brad Eldridge will actually be doing that webinar. So if you can attend that one, that would be great. The other two, if you're in KYTC, we'd appreciate if you'd attend those as well. If you want to watch past webinars, you can actually see them on the KYTC Highway Design website. If you go to the KYTC Design website and you go to Software and Support under Resources, it'll take you to the Software and Support webpage, and you can actually look at all the previous webinars. Also, if you have any questions about MicroStation, Inroads, ProjectWise, etc., you can email us at kytcadsupport@ky.gov, and we'll help you out as best we can. A couple of reminders before we start the webinar. You have to be present for the entire webinar to earn your PDH credits. You can watch as a group under one person's name to get those hours, but it would be wise to have a sign-in sheet so that you have documentation that you attended in case you get audited. Also, if you please could participate in our survey at the end of the webinar. This is information that we gather on most webinars. It actually helps us grade our presenters and the actual webinars themselves, and also gives us ideas on future webinars. Also, something that's a little new for this webinar, we actually have handouts for this webinar. If you look in your control panel towards the bottom, you'll actually see two handouts that Roy's been gracious enough to give us for reference for this webinar. So if you want those, you can actually print those out for yourself. So at this time, let's do some poll questions just to see how people are attending these webinars. So the first one, did you attend the previous Highway Design webinar? Kind of wait here for people to respond. Alright, it looks like we're stopping here about 93% participation. And it looks like 74% of you said yes and 26% no, so that's a pretty good showing the last time. We'll go on to our next one. How many of you previously attended? This will allow us to kind of gain some information about the attendance of our webinars, and then just to kind of see how many people are coming back. Okay, looks like we got about 96 participation, 90%. So a lot of you have actually, people are starting to attend quite a bit here. We've got 50% greater than 10, which is great. We're glad you're coming in. And actually, a lot of people, most people, have at least seen 1 to 5, which is awesome, and 6 to 10. So we're glad you're attending those, and we hope you keep coming back. These are good webinars. I think they're great personally, and we appreciate your attendance. Oops, got lost here. Okay, well, at this time, let's go ahead and hand it off to Roy, and let him go ahead and start the presentation. Roy, you ready?
I am.
All right. It's all yours.
All right, there we go. So thanks, Chris, and hello to everyone out there. So again, my name is Roy Sturgill. I'm a research engineer with the Kentucky Transportation Center at the University of Kentucky and a previous Transportation Cabinet employee. The purpose of this webinar is to overview and provide guidance for the recently updated Kentucky Contract Time Determination System. I'd like to give some credit to the folks at the Transportation Center at UK. Professor Tim Taylor led up a lot of this work, and then we also worked hand in hand with the folks here in the Highway Design Technical Support branch to make the tool what you're going to see today. We're pretty proud of it. There are several resources I would like to inform you about before we begin. Just as Chris mentioned, these slides and the implementation guide are available within the handout section of this webinar. Additionally, you can access the contract time tool that I'm going to demonstrate via the KYTC Division of Highway Design's intranet site. So as we begin this webinar, don't hesitate to type in questions. I'll try to address these toward the end of the session. And Chris is going to help us with this also, and also provide the opportunity to ask questions verbally. But should you have anything further after the webinar, don't hesitate to contact me per my contact information on the slides you see there. I don't mind to help any way I can. So just to break the ice, if you can't tell already, I'm sure you'll be able to tell by the end of the webinar today. This is the first time for me to be on this side of the screen, if you will, of a webinar. So a couple things. This is a little bit different for me, so bear with me. But two, I'm also I clicked through some of the attendees list, and I think I'm okay. But you know, when you're going into this, you have an idea of your audience, but you're not 100% sure. So kind of content-wise, I am going to do a general overview of pretty much what I consider everything in regard to setting contract time, and hopefully it's at a level that everybody will understand, but it also won't be overly boring to a lot of folks out there. So just to cover what we're going to talk about today, in this hour-long webinar, we will cover a lot of information and hopefully also answer the questions of anyone listening. In this session, I will cover some background information related to the development of the contract time system and also why there's a need for a system and the update to the previous system. I will discuss general information regarding project scheduling in regard to best practices, how contract time is used in Kentucky, and kind of set the stage for how the tool will be a useful resource in setting contract time. The end of the webinar will be spent in demonstrating the contract time tool for both large and small projects, as well as discussing the features and makeup of the system. We'll conclude the presentation portion of the webinar by providing some guidance on how to use the contract time system and next steps once you have the contract time estimate in hand. Then we can address any questions. So let's begin with why the system is necessary. First, it's federally mandated. So Chapter 23 of the Code of Federal Regulations, Section 635.121, requires all state transportation agencies to have written procedures for determining and setting contract time for projects. This regulation prompted the original version of the Kentucky Contract Time Determination System and kicked off a collaborative effort between the Transportation Cabinet and the University of Kentucky Transportation Center. Prior to the year 2000, KYTC used a system for calculating contract time that was mainframe-based and used a single set of activities or a single model to set contract time for all projects. The activity times were set by production rates whose roots were untraceable and very dated. Due to the makeup of the system, all contract time was set by Central Office, Division of Highway Design. This system was dated, it had some flaws to deal with, and it was generally considered difficult to use. The original Kentucky Contract Time Determination System instituted some improvements. It started with 5 different project types or 5 different models, but again it used canned production rates even though they were vetted by a panel of experts. This system was initially highly regarded and was the predominant model for many other DOTs across the United States. While improved, the system used an interface of Microsoft Excel and Microsoft Project to estimate contract time, which some found complex and cumbersome. Though since they were Microsoft programs and readily available, it was something that allowed district personnel to provide the contract time estimates along with their construction estimate and plan sets as part of the design process. While these are all great improvements to the system, it still proved to be somewhat difficult to use and again relied upon the canned production rates that even when updated entail immense variability between locations, equipment used, contractor, and many other criteria. So as such, the system was not favored by many KYTC staff, and as of 2011, when we sent out a survey, only 85% of the design staff knew that such a system existed, and of that 85%, only 50% noted that it was used. So, and one of the noted concerns was the accuracy of the system. And in fact, the most recent study we did found that the mean error across the 5 different system models ranged from 49% to 436% off of the actual construction times for projects. So no doubt a major contributing factor to this error was the reliance on the canned production rates. So while the use of production rates is a federal highway administration suggestion for how contract time should be set, our recent study, SPR 11-411, updating the Kentucky Contract Time Determination System, found an easier method that relied on historical data with inherent use of production rates without them explicitly being relied upon. So this recent study developed the system that we're going to demonstrate today, and in testing has showed improved accuracy from the older systems. It has also been commended for its ease of use. So in fact, in testing that we did of the new system, we found it was 4 times more accurate than the original version. So especially when talking about contract time, it's a good idea to begin with the end in mind. The estimate of contract time is not merely a box to be checked during the development of a project. This estimate will determine and have enormous influence on contract price, project risk, the adversarial nature of the project, and many other factors. It indicates how long public may be impeded by the construction of a project and aids in the planning of construction staff resources and funding. This and the next few slides cover KYTC specific and general information regarding project scheduling. To begin with, the Highway Design Manual states the contract time estimate will be a deliverable at a point of discussion at the final joint inspection meeting. While some have continued to rely upon central office and district support to develop these estimates, the designer or project manager, be that in-house or consultant, is the responsible party and should be able to easily use this tool to provide a base estimate of contract time for discussion at the final joint inspection. The Highway Design Manual actually states that the number of construction work days and/or completion date will be provided at this meeting, and the tool presented today gives an easy 10-minute solution to provide those estimates and figures. Additionally, the Highway Design Manual states, and this is a quote, "The project manager should have the recommended construction time approved by the district construction member of the project development team and other team members as deemed appropriate." So it's a very good place to start to do that at the final joint inspection. The remaining references of the manual on contract time state the contract time is deliverable at the check print stage, it's an item to be checked during constructability review, and that a finalized estimate is to be delivered with final plans. One determination partially covered in the Highway Design Manual, but further detailed in the Transportation Cabinet standard specifications for road and bridge construction, is the type of contract time specifications used for the project. KYTC may specify contract time in 3 different ways, either by using completion dates, calendar days, or working days. These times may also be procured from the contractor as a selection factor during the bid letting, and there's more information on this in both the Highway Design and the standard specifications that I won't cover today. The basic determination between these 3 contract time methods is associated to risk, and often, or a majority of this risk is related to weather. Adverse weather in the months from December through March can drastically affect the ability to do work, as noted in the standard specifications. Weather is a necessary consideration when estimating contract time, and understanding how the system presented today accounts for weather is important and is discussed in the next few slides. The premise to understand is that risk associated with adverse weather delays can vary depending on the type of scheduling contract conditions used. Completion date and calendar day contracts lean the risk associated with weather toward the contractor. Calendar day contracts charge calendar days regardless of weather, and completion date contracts don't even count days. The contractor must simply be completed by the set date if they don't want to incur liquidated damages. With that said, uncharacteristic weather can be accounted for by change order in extreme circumstances and if deemed appropriate. Working day contracts place the risk associated with weather on KYTC. This type of contracting charges a contractor a working day only when weather conditions allow work on controlling operations for 4 or more hours. This allows the contractor to shed risk associated with weather, but it's problematic for construction staff to monitor and document. Specifically, issues or conflicts arise in determining what the controlling operation of work is and when conditions are favorable enough to work on that operation for 4 or more hours. Further information related to project scheduling contract requirements can be found in the standard specifications for road and bridge construction. So beyond the requirements of the Highway Design Manual and construction specifications, there are a few general points to consider when estimating contract time. First, it can be a very complex task and time-consuming. The process could easily require the project manager to research current production rates, develop a work breakdown structure of activities, develop activity logic for the activities based on perceived progression of work, and so on. But let's consider what information is really on hand for the designer. The designer can't be sure of the equipment that the contractor will use, or the work schedule they will use, or the details of how they will progress the work, or other critical factors in estimating contract time according to activities or production rates. This uncertainty makes estimating contract time more of an art than a science, and a process highly dependent on a person's experience. In the end, the design contract time estimate is just that, an estimate. It's a base estimate. The intent is to give the contractor enough time to complete the project, but not too much time to incur unneeded traffic impacts, all the while satisfying the project needs or commitments of when sections should be open or complete. A key understanding here is that very compact or tight contract times will typically cost more than schedules that are more flexible. The system I'll present shortly provides an estimate based on historic information. In essence, it captures the experience of previous KYTC projects to provide an estimate of contract time. Based on the designer's availability of information as to what will take place during construction, this base estimate of contract time needs vetted. As you'll see, the system makes estimating contract time very simple, but these estimates cannot be used at face value. They need to be validated by experienced personnel and optimally by the KYTC construction staff that will be managing the project. So before the demonstration, I just want to highlight some considerations that I've previously touched upon. When estimating contract time, the designer needs to consider any project needs associated with the contract time. Several potential needs are listed here, but this is not an all-inclusive list. So just to go through a few of these, first let's talk about public constraints and inconvenience. So consider how construction is going to impact daily commutes and to what degree. Determine if there are special events which will be drastically impacted by construction, and if work can be scheduled to minimize those impacts. Determine any access that needs to be maintained or maintained by a certain date for school traffic or other reasons. All these considerations may impact the proposed letting for a project or may incur constricting the schedule or the use of milestones. The key here is a clear understanding of the goal of the project. That is the project intended to be placed and open for a particular reason? These considerations also affect cost. If there can be flexibility given to the schedule, it is likely project bids will reflect that flexibility. On the other hand, if by necessity the schedule is not flexible, it is likely increased construction costs will be a result. Milestones are a scheduling tool that can be used to have different aspects of the project completed by times varying from the total project completion date. These may be added to the contract time estimate produced from the tools provided within this system that I will present, but the system isn't complex enough to automatically make adjustments based on these milestones. Considerations of milestones and their associated effect will need to be considered once starting from the base estimate. This also goes for any other project complexities needing extra time. So the system does provide a range with an average, a low, and a high, but if there's something that is out of the ordinary for the project, the estimate will likely need adjusted. Another consideration is weather. Adverse weather in the months from December through March will affect the ability to do work. These items need to be considered as we have already discussed, and then they also will affect the scheduling, the type of construction or the type of contract time specifications used for the project. And we've discussed how the allocation of risk within those different systems can be impacted. So with that in mind, let's discuss the new system. So the updated Kentucky Contract Time Determination System is a set of regression-based tools housed within Microsoft Excel. This means that the contract time estimates are based on historically collected start and completion dates of past projects. The system will need to be updated on a periodic basis, but updating the regression models is fairly easy now that the process has been captured. Linear regression represents a completely viable method for estimating contract time. Remember, this is an estimate as provided by the system and not an absolute answer. Linear regression is acceptable here due to the level of understanding regarding means and methods and production rates that will occur on the project. These models fit the data considerably well for the level of time estimate needed, and as mentioned, these models are more accurate than the production rate-based system. The updated system has 6 models, 1 for projects with construction estimates less than $1 million, and 5 for projects over that amount. These models require very few inputs, which may include varying bid item quantities and the construction estimate. Interestingly, the projects under $1 million did not have a strong relationship to quantities. This will probably make more sense to the experienced designers, as those projects typically are short duration and are more frequently constrained by events such as school openings and closings than any amount of work. In fact, over 90% of the projects estimated to cost less than $1 million are completed in less than 9 months, or what could be considered a single construction season. And that may be a better approach for considering times for projects of this size. So back to the inputs of the system. I need to note that the system requires network access. This is because the construction estimate is required, and these dollar values need to be adjusted for time. The system does this automatically using an FHWA construction cost index. All dollars are converted to $2005 because that's the start date of when the data used to develop the regression equations. Once the few user inputs are entered into the system will automatically estimate the contract time and assist in providing the estimates in calendar days, working days, and completion date based on the input letting day. So just a few more housekeeping items before demonstrating the system. I know it seems like I'm holding back, but understanding the background is essential in the correct use of the tool. So if I ever refer to a large versus small project, just know I'm referring to the $1 million threshold. In both sizes of projects, selecting the project type is needed. Smaller projects will use the typically available design project type, while the larger project models are more access-based. And you can see there on the slide the table of the 5 different project types for the larger projects. But with these large projects, select the best project type fit based on a holistic feeling of the project. So these types include limited access, open access, new routes, bridge rehabs, and bridge replacements. So for instance, if a project is predominantly a new route but replaces an existing bridge, you'd want to use the new route model. And then if you still question the type of the project type selection you made, I think you'll find it easy enough to go back and look at multiple models to compare your contract time estimates. And again, the system is just providing a base estimate, and that's going to necessitate further review and many other considerations before it goes any further in the design process. Additionally, if you ever have projects close to that $1 million threshold, again, I think you'll find it easy to try both the smaller project model and one of the larger project models in order to compare those results. And basically from the outputs of this system, I think that is a good estimate to take to the final joint inspection and then start your discussions of other considerations at that meeting. So now we're ready to begin some initial steps to follow for the demonstration. First thing you're going to want to do is download the template from the Highway Design intranet site and open the file. You'll need to enable macros to have the worksheet function properly. So this is something you may need to adjust your security settings to allow this, or you may need to get assistance from your IT support. If you download the file, you should only have to do this the first time you open it, but you also would probably want to re-download it periodically just to make sure you have the most frequent version. So next thing, you're going to want to select the appropriate button. There's going to be a screen that comes up with 2 options, and you'll either select a smaller or larger project based on the $1 million threshold. And then the system automatically will update the cost index information as long as you have the network access. And that may take a few seconds. So don't be alarmed if it doesn't open all at once. From there, depending on the project selection, the inputs will vary, but you'll enter the amount, enter information into the yellow fields. The yellow fields are the ones that indicate user input. For the larger project, you'll encounter another screen where you'll have to select another button related to the project type. There are many notes throughout the system, both in the input fields, which show up as comments. So if you see your input field has a red triangle in the corner, if you hover your mouse over that field, you'll see the comments appear. And there's, on each of the model sheets, there's also a worksheet notes that provide some helpful guidance. Before we get into the demonstration, the other thing is, once you start these sheets, you're going to want to save them, and I'll give you some recommendations on how you do that. So with that, let's get into the demonstration. Let me switch my screen over here. All right. So the first time that you open the Excel sheet, it will populate a security warning here, and that's going to tell you, the content's been disabled. So if you click the options button there, you'll either come up with one box, or in this case, you'll have two buttons to enable content. The first button here for the security alert is macros, and we're going to enable the content to allow the macros. And the other button here is the one that's going to allow this file to connect to the internet and download that FHWA cost index information. So I'll click OK there, and you'll see in the background there the cost index information starts to download, and then the first thing that pops up is the question of what size project are we going to deal with. So we're going to start with the smaller projects, and so I just click that button, and it takes me to the smaller project sheet. So the first thing that I would do is enter my item number, and as you see there, that field did have one of those red triangles, and as I hover my mouse over there, it lets me know that, what am I supposed to do in that field. So once I enter the item number, that's the wrong format. Sorry about that. Text, and then we're going to make that. There we go. So once I enter that item number, the next thing I would want to do is save the file, and somewhere in the file name I would type in that item number just to make sure you know what it is. So from there, it's a fairly simple sheet. As I mentioned, the yellow fields are the only inputs. So as you can tell here, we only have two inputs for this particular estimate, and then we have a letting date that we could input. So if I highlight, hover over the construction estimate field, it's telling me that projects should be less than $1 million, and not only should they be less than $1 million, it will actually generate an error or a stop condition. It will not allow you to put in more than $1 million in this field. So for our example today, we're going to use a $600. I got to be in that field. A $650,000 project, and then the next thing we need to select is the design project type. And here we have, once we click in that field, we have a drop-down menu, and we have all the design project types that we can choose from. So for this example, we're going to pick the bridge replacement project, and then the regression formula is going to give us a mean duration, a lower duration, and an upper duration. Now again, these aren't concrete answers, and it is giving you a range, but your project may in fact be even outside of those ranges. This is for majority of projects, and this is for a baseline estimate to start your discussions of contract time. So the next thing that I'll mention here is the worksheet notes. As I mentioned, every sheet has these. This one is going to give you a few little hints here to tell you, we're only going to do, this is only used for projects less than $1 million. And if you have a project near $1 million, it may be worth trying the larger project tools. In testing the larger project tools, the other 5 models were a little more accurate. So if you do have one close, it may be worth trying out those other spreadsheets. It lets you know what fields you're to enter information in, and then it also tells you, always verify your results with project management staff. And then it also lets you know that for smaller projects, considering construction seasons may be a better approach. And if you have less than a construction season, but you can open up like the Division of Maintenance does with resurfacing projects, where they may put them out in winter lettings, but allow them to be finished anytime between the winter letting and the fall. That provides the contractor a lot of flexibility, and so typically you're going to get your better prices that way. The other thing is it talks about the schedule estimator, and the cost indices are updating automatically, and it also gives you contact information for the CAD support branch here in Highway Design. And actually, if you were to click on this box, it would open up a Microsoft Outlook email notice going straight to them. So now that we have our estimate, there's 2 other tools on the sheet that I want to talk about: the schedule estimator and the season estimator. First, the schedule estimator allows you to enter your proposed letting date. So let's say the letting date was going to be March 25th of this year. According to that letting date, it draws down the calendar days from the equation, and then it will estimate a completion date. So the estimated completion date is not simply the calendar days plus the letting date, because the contractor doesn't begin work until notice proceed, after award of the project. So typically we've put in an average of a 1-month addition of time to go from the letting date to the notice to proceed, and then you add in your calendar days to get to that estimated completion date. The other calculation here is estimating working days, and this is a little more tricky. Working days would have to be backed out of the contract time between notice proceed and completion date. So you add 1 month to the letting date for that, and additionally with working days, the contractor is not charged working days in the first month of their operations. So there you would take another month before you'd start calculating work days for the project. So what these working days use is a separate sheet that I'll demonstrate real quick here. This is a sheet that you can manipulate, though I would not really recommend it. It's based on the background for it is based on weather data from WeatherSpark, and what we've done is looked at what the average rainfall is for Kentucky through the different months, and average temperatures, and what percentage of time you could have rainfall issues or temperature issues that may limit how much work you can get done or how many working days you might have in a month. Additionally, you can see here that according to specification, no working days are charged in December, January, February, and March. And so we only have a number of working days from April to November, and you can see those vary according to these percentages of rainfall and temperature issues. The other thing you can change is how many days a week a contractor may work, and you'll see that a lot of contractors will ramp up production in the summer months. But if you have a project that you don't anticipate that, you can come in here and adjust the number of days per week that the contractor will work. All that information is fed into this working day calculation table that basically provides information that's fed back to the working day estimate. So a little bit of a complex situation, but the working days calculation, again, it's an estimate, but it attempts to account for weather and how many working days the contractor would potentially get in a month, and give you an estimate to base your to start from. The last tool on the screen here is the season estimator, which I think is very relevant to the smaller projects. What this estimator does is it takes the number of calendar days and divides by an estimate of 8 months, which is a typical construction season, and then gives you a low, medium, high range. And so this calculation does not consider the letting date, and it's meant for informational purposes. But it's a good indicator to, if you have a project and you look at it and it's well within a one season limit, it might be something worth giving the contractor a little more flexibility to schedule their operations. So that's kind of the information on the worksheet. Again, if you needed to change your letting date, that's easy to do. One thing I want to demonstrate here is if we were to let this project later in the year, you'd see the number of working days go down because, again, you're not charging working days in January, February, and March. So if we were to let it in December, our working days would go down because they would anticipate getting some work done during those months, even though the working days wouldn't be charged. The last feature of the sheet is a print button. Each sheet is set up to print on a single page, so that makes it easy to print and take to that final joint inspection meeting to let it be an item of discussion. So diving into the larger project, if I were to have opened and select the larger project, I'm not going to reopen the sheet, but it would have taken me to this page, and from this page I would enter my item number, and from there I've got some instructions there to tell me what to do. Save it as an item number for a reference, and then I can select a project. So we're going to select, let's see, we're going to select a limited access example. And so here in this sample, I've only got 3 inputs to worry about. Again, each one of these are commented. This one says, and it also gives me the range of information that was used to develop the tool. So this is a project anywhere between $1 and $50 million. That's not to say you can't use a dollar figure that's outside of that range. It just means that you're starting to lose accuracy outside of that range. So I'm actually going to put in a little above that with $52,536,000. The next item there is roadway excavation, and it tells me what bid item code to look for. And actually, you can put anything from 0 to 2 million yards here. So on this particular example project, there was no roadway excavation. It was an embankment job. And then for storm sewer, again, it gives you some bid item codes to look for. And again, you've got a range from 0 to 2,000 linear feet. And on this particular example, we had 0. So once I get all those inputs done, there's my estimate in both a low, mean, and upper duration. And again, I've got worksheet notes, and I can put in a different letting date, and all the other information is just as it was on the small sheet. One thing I will say is, just like in any Excel spreadsheet, if you need to add the bid codes, you can easily do that just running down the list and just add your quantities together just as you would in Excel normally. So that's kind of the quick demonstration of the tool. All the other sheets are similar. Some of them, like the open access, has a few more inputs than others, just based on the equation that was used to develop it. A bridge rehab is a construction estimate only, and so it's a pretty easy tool to use. Gives you a pretty quick estimate, and again, you can take that estimate to the final joint inspection and start your discussion from there. So just to wrap up, we're going back to the PowerPoint real quick. So the updated Kentucky contract determination system will only produce a base starting estimate for your project. There's many other variables to consider and account for before submitting as a final contract time. You'll want to consider things like local events, project safety needs, and other factors as listed on this slide. But foremost, make sure that the estimate is reviewed by experienced personnel. You should always attempt to have district construction staff who are going to manage the project, review the project, and specifically the contract time estimate. Because many variables that go into contract time are really dependent on field conditions, and these folks are the ones that have the most experience with that. So lastly, always reevaluate the project should there be any changes, whether that be in quantities, cost estimates, or the letting date. So with that, I thank you, and you're welcome to contact me or Central Office Division of Highway Design. But before we go, we're going to ask Chris to jump back on here, and we can address any questions anybody has.
All right. Thank you, Roy. We've got a couple of questions here, Roy. One of the questions is I'm actually going to go ahead and take control of this here.
Okay.
And one of the questions is where can you download the calculation duration tool? That's by Andrew Brown there. And if you look at the screen, you can actually download it at the KYTC intranet under the software request and support page. And that's where you can actually download that. Roy, is there any other place that we can download that you know of? Or
no, I think that's the best place. If other people need a hold of it, that might be something that we could put it somewhere else. But that's the only place I know of right now.
Okay. And I guess there's been a question of emailing the link to all the people in attendance. Would you have an issue with that, or we may be able to do that? I think.
I don't have any issue with it, no.
Okay. So what we might do is we might send out that link and see if anybody has difficulty in getting to that. So what we'll do is we'll email out that link, and hopefully people can get to this. This is an amazing tool. It actually does what the previous tool did faster and with more accuracy. So we really appreciate your work in this and making this something that people can use. Actually, one of the things we can do now too, this is something that is a little bit new, is if anybody has any questions that they want to verbalize instead of typing out in the questions box, they can actually raise their hand in their control panel, and we can actually unmute you, and you can ask questions. Maybe they're too lengthy to type out or whatever. So right now we're going to open that up. If anybody wants to raise their hand in the attendance box, they just click on their raise hand. So we'll give a couple seconds there for anybody who might want to raise their hand so we can answer their questions. Nobody? Okay. Well, considering that I've actually gone through our questions, Roy, I want to thank you again for attending, or presenting, excuse me. And again, thank you for helping develop this tool. And Roy, is there anything else you'd like to add before we head out here?
We just got a question of does this account for holidays? And the answer there is no, it does not. They're sort of in the equations taken in by the historical information, but it does not directly account for holidays. So again, like we mentioned, it's going to give you the base estimate, and if you have a holiday in there, you may need to add a day. But if I will say that if it's a longer project, multiple year project, accounting for holidays isn't necessary. That would only be for shorter projects because, like I said, they are included somewhat in the historical information.
Okay, great. Is there any other questions that we have here? Nobody's raised their hands. Going once? Going twice? Okay, well, Roy, thanks again for presenting here and actually helping develop this tool. We really appreciate it.
Thank you all.
All right. Well, I'll tell you what. Please, everybody, don't forget to do our survey at the end of our webinar. Again, those help us out a lot. And we hope you attend the next webinar. Thanks again for attending.